Let me destroy a lie you've been carrying. I just need to want it more. No, you want it plenty. You want it so much it keeps you up at night. You want it so much that thinking about not having it makes you physically sick. The problem isn't desire. The problem is you've been trying to think your way into action when you actually need to act your way into clarity. You're waiting for the perfect plan, the perfect moment, the perfect version of yourself. And while you wait, people with half your talent and twice your follow-through are building the life you're dreaming about. Today, that ends. I know exactly why you clicked on this video. You're tired of being the person with all the ideas and none of the results. You're exhausted from the mental gymnastics you do every single day, convincing yourself that tomorrow will be different. That next week you'll finally get serious. That once you figure out the perfect system, you'll become unstoppable. But tomorrow comes and you hit snooze. Next week arrives and you're still researching, still planning, still stuck in the exact same place. And the worst part? You know you're capable of more. You can feel it. That's what makes this so painful. It's not that you don't have what it takes. It's that you're not using what you have. So let me tell you why you need to hear this today. Why this video might be the most important 10 minutes you spend this year. You've been told that ambition without action makes you lazy. That if you really wanted it, you'd just do it. That successful people have something you don't. Discipline, willpower, motivation that never runs out. That's the lie that's been paralyzing you. This video isn't about morning routines or productivity hacks or 10 steps to stop procrastinating. This is about understanding the psychological trap you're in. Ambitious people aren't lazy. They're overwhelmed by the gap between their vision and their current reality. That gap creates paralysis, and paralysis looks like laziness to everyone else, including you. Here's the reframe that changes everything. Your ambition isn't the problem. Your inability to start small is. You're trying to leap from here to the mountaintop in one jump, and when you can't, you call yourself lazy and quit. But momentum isn't built through massive action. It's built through tiny, unglamorous consistency that your ego considers beneath you. By the end of this video, you'll understand why your laziness is actually a protection mechanism, how perfectionism masquerades as procrastination, what the 5-minute promise is, and why it's more powerful than any motivational speech, and how to finally bridge the gap between who you are and who you know you're capable of becoming. This is about stopping the cycle of self-betrayal. So let me tell you a story. There was a man who wanted to be an architect more than anything in the world. As a kid, he'd sketch buildings on napkins, on cardboard, on the backs of homework assignments, anywhere he could find space. His teachers would stop by his desk and marvel at his designs. His parents would brag to their friends, "Our son is going to be famous one day. You should see what he can create." He'd lie awake at night imagining the skylines he'd transform, the structures that would carry his name into history, the legacy he'd leave behind. He went to architecture school, got the degree, top of his class actually. Everyone said he was brilliant. Everyone said he was going places. But then something strange happened. He graduated and got a job at a prestigious firm, and he never designed anything real. Not one building, not one structure that people could walk into and say, "He made this." He spent his days doing grunt work, adjusting other people's blueprints, fixing measurements, organizing files, making sure the coffee machine was stocked. Important work, sure, but not his work. Not the work he'd dreamed about since he was a kid. His boss would pull him aside every few months and say, "When are you going to show me your own designs? You've got talent. Why are you wasting it on busy work?" And he'd always have an excuse ready. "I'm studying the masters first. I want to really understand the fundamentals before I try anything ambitious. I'm working on something big. I'm just not ready to share yet. I want it to be perfect." Years passed. 5 years, 10 years, 15. The sketches piled up in drawers at home. Beautiful, intricate drawings that no one ever saw. His friends would ask at dinner parties, "Why don't you enter competitions? Why don't you pitch your ideas to the firm? You've been there long enough. They trust you." And he'd get defensive, sometimes even angry. "I'm not lazy," he'd snap, voice tight. "I'm just waiting for the right project. I'm being strategic. You don't understand how this industry works." But here's what was really happening. The truth he couldn't admit even to himself. Every time he sat down with a blank page that could become something real, something people would see and judge and critique and possibly reject, he felt a terror so deep he couldn't name it. So he'd do what ambitious but paralyzed people do. He'd research more. He'd study more buildings. He'd buy more books on design theory. He'd tell himself he was preparing, that he was being thorough, that he was setting himself up for success. He convinced himself that designing in private was still designing, that thinking about building was the same as actually building, that as long as he never put his work out into the world, he couldn't fail. And if he couldn't fail, he could maintain the fantasy that he was still destined for greatness. One day, 42 years old, sitting in his apartment surrounded by those drawers full of sketches, he watched a documentary about a young architect, 26 years old. No formal training, just passion and guts. This kid had built an award-winning community center using recycled materials and volunteer labor. The building was on the cover of architecture magazines. Critics were calling him a visionary. And as our architect watched this documentary, something broke inside him. Not inspiration, recognition. This kid hadn't waited to be ready. He hadn't spent years studying the masters or waiting for the perfect project. He'd started with what he had, learned by doing, failed in public, adjusted, and succeeded anyway. And sitting there in that apartment, our architect realized something that made him want to scream. He'd been hoarding his potential like a dragon hoarding gold, keeping it safe, keeping it pristine, keeping it locked away in drawers where no one could touch it, where no one could diminish it, where it could remain perfect and untested forever. And in doing so, he'd buried it alive. He'd killed the very thing he loved most by protecting it from the world. Now, I'm telling you this because most ambitious people are living that man's life right now. You have the vision, you've got the ideas, you've got the talent, but you're keeping it in a drawer because as long as it's just potential, it can't be judged. As long as you haven't really tried, you can tell yourself you could have been great if you'd gone for it. As long as it stays in your head, it remains perfect. But potential that never becomes reality isn't potential. It's a tragedy. It's a life half-lived. It's standing at the edge of everything you want and choosing to stay frozen because movement means risk. The question isn't, am I lazy? The question is, what am I protecting by not starting? Are you protecting your ego, your self-image as someone with unlimited potential? Are you protecting yourself from the possibility that you might try your absolute best and still come up short? Because let me tell you something that's going to sting. Staying stuck is a choice. Calling yourself lazy is a choice. It's a choice that lets you off the hook. It's easier to say, I'm just lazy, than to say, I'm terrified of being ordinary. Let me give you another way to think about this. Imagine trying to push a car that's been parked for years. The wheels are rusted, the brakes are seized. Every part of it has settled into stillness. You walk up to this car and you push with everything you've got, and it doesn't budge. Not even an inch. So you step back, wipe the sweat off your forehead, and you think, this is impossible. I'm not strong enough. This car is never going to move. And you walk away, calling yourself weak, telling yourself you don't have what it takes. But here's what you didn't know, what you couldn't see. That first push, the one that feels completely pointless because nothing visible happens, that push is doing something invisible. It's breaking the rust. It's loosening the grip. It's creating microscopic movement in parts you can't see. The second push does more. The third push does even more. And by the 10th push, maybe the 15th, suddenly the car rolls. Not because the 10th push was stronger than the first. Not because you suddenly became more capable. Because the first 9 pushes made the 10th possible. Because momentum is cumulative. Because beginnings are supposed to feel impossible. Your ambition is that car. And you keep walking away after the first push because you don't see immediate results. You think, if I were really meant for this, it would be easier. If I were really talented, it wouldn't feel this hard. No, that's not how it works. Beginnings are supposed to be hard. That's not evidence of your inadequacy. That's evidence of inertia. And inertia is broken through repeated, unglamorous action, not through waiting for inspiration to strike like lightning. I learned this the hard way. I had notebooks full of business ideas. I'm talking stacks of notebooks. Websites I'd planned out in excruciating detail but never launched. Books I'd outlined chapter by chapter but never written. Courses I'd designed in my head that never made it past my imagination. And I told myself I was strategizing. I told myself I was waiting for the right time. I told myself I was being smart, being careful, being responsible. But the truth I couldn't face for years was this. I was terrified of being ordinary. I'd built this entire identity around being the person with potential. I was the smart one, the creative one, the one who was going to do something big someday. And as long as I never fully tried, I could maintain that identity. I could walk into any room and think, if I really applied myself, I could be the most successful person here. But the moment I actually tried, really tried, not just dabbled or started and stopped, I'd have to face the possibility that I might just be average, that my potential might not be as limitless as I'd been telling myself. And that possibility terrified me more than staying stuck. Then one day, someone asked me a question that shattered everything. We were having coffee and I was explaining for probably the 100th time why I hadn't launched this business I'd been talking about for 2 years. And she just looked at me, really looked at me and said, "What if you're not lazy? What if you're just addicted to the fantasy version of success because it's easier than the work version?" And I wanted to argue with her. I wanted to defend myself, but I couldn't, because she was right. The fantasy version of success is perfect. In fantasy, you skip the boring parts. You skip the part where you have no idea what you're doing. You skip the failures, the embarrassments, the moments where you want to quit. You skip the part where you're terrible at something before you're good at it. You just fast forward to the part where everyone's applauding, where you're on stage accepting awards, where people are calling you brilliant. But real success? Real success is built in the gap between "I'm going to do this" and "I finally did this." And that gap is filled with unglamorous, ego-bruising, one foot in front of the other action that nobody sees and nobody celebrates. The day I stopped waiting to feel motivated and just committed to 5 minutes a day, everything changed. 5 minutes of writing. 5 minutes of building. 5 minutes of doing the actual thing I'd been planning and researching and preparing for, and at first, my ego threw a tantrum. 5 minutes? That's nothing. That's not serious. That's not how successful people operate, but I did it anyway. I set a timer. I wrote for 5 minutes. And when the timer went off, I was allowed to stop guilt-free. No judgment, no self-criticism. Just 5 minutes and done. And here's what happened. Most days, I didn't stop at 5 minutes. Because starting is the hard part. Once you're in motion, once you've broken through that initial resistance, continuing is actually easier than stopping. But that's not even the most important part. The most important part is what those 5 minutes did to my brain. They proved to my brain that starting isn't dangerous, that imperfect action is better than perfect inaction, that I could do this thing I'd been avoiding, and the world didn't end. I didn't die. I didn't get exposed as a fraud. I just did 5 minutes of work, and then I did 5 more the next day and the next. Let me break down the core truths for you because I think we need to get crystal clear on what's actually happening here. Truth number 1, ambition without action is self-torture. Wanting something deeply and not pursuing it is one of the most painful experiences a human being can have. It's not laziness, it's psychological warfare. You're punishing yourself every single day for not being someone you refuse to become through action. Every morning you wake up and the gap between your dreams and your reality hasn't changed, you're inflicting a wound on yourself. And you've been doing this for how long? Months? Years? Decades? Truth number 2. Motivation is a result, not a requirement. This is the big one. This is the lie that's been keeping you stuck. You've been waiting to feel motivated before you start. That's completely backward. Action creates motivation. Momentum creates motivation. Finishing one small thing creates the desire to finish another. You don't wait for the feeling and then move. You move and then the feeling comes. Every single time you wait to feel motivated, you're reinforcing the pattern of inaction. You're teaching your brain that feelings dictate behavior. But it's supposed to work the other way around. Truth number 3. Perfectionism is fear in a tuxedo. Every time you say, "I'll start when I'm ready," or I need to learn more first, or I want to make sure I do this right, you need to ask yourself one question. Is this wisdom or is this fear dressed up as preparation? Because most of the time, 99% of the time, it's fear. It's fear wearing the mask of professionalism or thoroughness or strategic thinking. But underneath that mask, it's just fear. Fear of judgment, fear of failure, fear of discovering you're not as special as you thought, and fear disguised as perfectionism will steal your entire life if you let it. It'll keep you planning and preparing and perfecting until you're 80 years old, looking back at a life full of dreams you never pursued because you were waiting to be ready. Truth number 4. Small doesn't mean insignificant. Your ego wants grand gestures. Your ego wants the montage, wants the dramatic transformation, wants to go from zero to hero overnight. But that's not how real change works. Real change happens in the margins. 5 minutes here. One decision there. Showing up when you don't feel like it. Choosing the hard thing when the easy thing is right there. These tiny actions repeated consistently become transformation. They become momentum. They become the life you've been dreaming about. And here's the paradox that nobody talks about. You think you'll feel capable once you succeed. You think confidence comes first and then success follows. But it's the opposite. You'll only succeed once you act before feeling capable. Confidence doesn't precede action. Confidence follows it. You don't become brave and then do the scary thing. You do the scary thing and then become brave. Every successful person you admire started before they were ready. They felt the same fear you're feeling right now. The difference is they moved anyway. So let me give you some practical steps, because I don't want you to leave here inspired but paralyzed. I want you to actually do something different starting right now, today, this moment. Step 1. The 5-minute promise. Commit to 5 minutes a day on the thing you've been avoiding. Not an hour. Not when you have time. Not when you feel motivated. 5 minutes. Set a timer on your phone. When it goes off, you can stop guilt-free. No shame, no judgment. You showed up. That's what matters. Most days you won't stop at 5 minutes, but that's not the point. The point is teaching your brain that starting isn't dangerous. Step 2. Kill the highlight reel. Stop consuming content about people who've already made it when you haven't started yet. Unfollow the success stories on social media. Stop watching the interviews with billionaires. Stop reading about overnight successes. They're feeding your fantasy addiction and making your real beginning feel inadequate by comparison. You need silence and space to build, not comparison and distraction. Your beginning doesn't need to look like anyone else's middle or end. Step 3. Create proof rituals. Keep a done list instead of a to-do list. At the end of each day, write down what you actually did, even if it was just those 5 minutes. Even if it feels small. Even if your ego says it doesn't count. This rewires your brain to see yourself as someone who follows through instead of someone who just plans. You're building evidence of your new identity. You're proving to yourself that you're becoming someone different. Step 4. Starve the perfectionism. Before you start anything, say this out loud. This will be bad at first, and that's part of the process. Give yourself explicit permission to be terrible. Give yourself permission to create something you'd be embarrassed to show anyone. Because perfectionism dies when you stop feeding it impossible expectations. And the only way to get good at something is to be willing to be bad at it first. Step 5. Announce nothing. Stop telling people your plans before you've done any work. Every time you share your vision, every time you talk about what you're going to do, your brain gets a dopamine hit as if you've already accomplished it. You get the reward without doing the work. Keep your mouth shut. Let your results speak. Show, don't tell. Build in private, launch in public. So here's where we are. You came into this video thinking you were lazy. Maybe you've been calling yourself that for years. Maybe other people have been calling you that too. Maybe you've worn it like a shameful label, like evidence of some fundamental flaw in your character. But now you know the truth. You're not lazy. You're paralyzed by the gap between who you are and who you're capable of becoming. And you've been trying to think your way across that gap instead of walking. You've been waiting for the perfect plan, the perfect moment, the perfect version of yourself. But perfect never comes. Ready never arrives. Someday is a place you'll never reach. The architect who never built? That doesn't have to be your story. That's not going to be your story. Because you're about to do the one thing that ambitious but stuck people never do. You're going to start before you're ready. You're going to start badly. You're going to start small. You're going to start without knowing how it ends. But you're going to start. And that start, that tiny 5-minute start, is going to save your life. Your new mantra. The thing I want you to say to yourself every single morning when that voice tells you to wait another day is this. I don't need to feel motivated. I don't need to be perfect. I just need to move. 5 minutes today becomes 5 years of momentum. My ambition isn't a curse, it's a compass. And I'm finally going to follow it. Say it until you believe it. Say it until starting becomes easier than staying stuck. Say it until you look back at this moment as the day everything changed. If this hit you somewhere deep, if something shifted while you were listening, I want you to do something for me. Drop a comment right now and tell me, what's the one thing you're going to stop planning and actually start doing? I'm not asking for your life story. I'm not asking for a detailed explanation. Just tell me the one thing. I want to know. I'll read it. And if you're ready for more truth that disrupts the excuses, more conversations that challenge the stories you've been telling yourself, hit that subscribe button. Not for me, for the version of you that's been waiting for permission to finally begin. You're not lazy. You never were. You're just standing still. Now move.